So, guys, in this next news story, a 17-year-old has been convicted of murdering a father of two after he had bought 65 knives online in the months before the killing. Rayis Nibeel, who's a 17-year-old drug dealer, used an account set up in his mother's name to buy the knives despite being under 18. He actually used his mother's ID to purchase these knives. St Albans Crown Court heard he bought dozens of weapons and large hunting knives and sold them on for profit. Nibeel was sentenced to 20 years at St Albans Crown Court for fatally stabbing Omar Khan in a dispute over drugs in Luton in September last year. In her sentencing remarks, Mrs. Justice Foster said Mr. Nibeel had made a number of orders over the previous few months for a huge quantities of knives, some 65 bladed articles costing around £1,200, none of which had a legitimate purpose in the possession of them. And all but a handful of these you had disposed of by the time of these offences. She said you had created a customer account in your mother's name to make the knife purchases, paying for all but a very few out of your own account, and arranging for them to be delivered to your home address. You explained you sold weapons to make extra money from kids and armed yourself because of your drug dealing. Last week, police chiefs warned under 18s buying knives online remain a serious concern and said senior officers have met retailers and social media firms to try to stop illegal sales. So the man that they murdered, Omar Khan, who was aged 38 at the time, and the other victim was very badly injured by both these guys. The judge said Mr. Nibeel was wielding a large machete-type knife on the evening of September 2023. It's believed that the man who passed away and the female that were injured were long-term partners. They were also both serious drug users with criminal records about which the jury heard in this trial. The victim's partner accepted that their purpose that evening was to acquire drugs to steal them without paying for them, and both she and Mr. Khan were carrying knives when they left the car driven by their friend who took them to the drugs meeting. Judge went on to say it was up some metal stairs with a platform and down a side alley behind Sunderland Park's Tesco in Luton in Bedfordshire. The victim's partner and the victim had not been there before. They did not know you two, but a rendezvous had been arranged with the RJ line for who you both were working for that evening. It was a dark area with 2 staircases, a landing and a partly gated area. It was around 2 o'clock in the morning. The victim and the victim's partner, on her admission, were withdrawing from drugs, and Mr. Khan was in a bad way and needing a fix, and another friend of theirs had made contact with the RJ line to arrange a meeting to acquire drugs. As stated, they did not intend to pay for those drugs, and it was that they were going to be taking it without paying, and the humiliation of having to hand over which provoked you, Mr. Nibeel, into stabbing Mr. Omar Khan. By their verdicts, the jury rejected your story that you had acted in self-defense when, as you admitted, you thrust the large machete-type knife into Omar Khan on 2 occasions. The victim's partner accepted that she and Omar were carrying relatively small knives which were dropped at the scene. Omar Khan was holding his at his side, but nothing that Omar Khan did justified in any way for you to attack upon him that night or the attack at the same time on his partner. You, Mr. Nibeel, were carrying a knife that night, and the jury also rejected your case, Umer Choudhury, that you had nothing to do with it. You were as entitled. You did not give any evidence, but you said on your behalf that you had no involvement and you'd only come to the area because you were bored and to have a cigarette with Rayis Nibeel for social company that evening, that you were only a peacemaker and you were calming, peaceful influence. That was not the case. The judge also went to say, what I am sure happened is this. The victim's partner and the victim came around the corner towards the stairs where it was dark, and from the shadows, the victim's partner saw 2 figures emerge on the roof. It was you, Umer Choudhury, which was standing somewhat behind Rayis Nibeel, who indicated they should approach. Omar was in the front, the partner followed as they walked up the stairs, and once there, Umer Choudhury was then behind the victim's partner. They were made aware that you, Nibeel, had the drugs. What followed happened very quickly. Mr. Khan told you to give them to him. I am sure he said it aggressively, but you, Rayis Nibeel, did not give it to him. He said, I am sure, as the victim's partner has told us, that Khan was armed with a knife tucked into his right-hand sleeve, which he was in the habit of carrying, but having listened carefully to the witness give evidence, I do not accept that you, Rayis Nibeel, ought to say that he threatened you or waved it at you. I am sure he did not. Omar Khan told you once again to give the pack of drugs to him, but you did not. Then you, Omar Choudhury, calmly standing by, smoking a cigarette, watched the encounter, so Nibeel refused and told him to give the drugs to them. You said that it wasn't worth it, so the drugs are thrown down as you directed, and the victim's partner stooped up and picked them up. There was then an exchange about the money, the paper, and as the victim's partner stooped down to get the drugs on the ground, you, Nibeel, and Omar Khan are having an altercation going back and forth, and you, Nibeel, were angry that you'd had to give up the drugs and all payments, and you were shouting at Khan, "Who do you think you are?" But Omar Khan was leaving, and you thereupon produced a really large knife and you lashed out with it. Your actions are described as just going mad mental by one of the witnesses that were there, who was actually the driver who dropped the victim and the victim's partner off, who was watching the events from nearby. So Omar Khan was leaving, and on the stairs, the judge said you stabbed him deeply in the chest, just as the victim's partner is standing up from retrieving the drugs. He said Mr. Khan did not see it coming and barely realised what has happened and moves down the stairs, and you stabbed him just below the ribs, but the blade passed through the front to the back and through the right renal artery, as cut right through his liver, which was sliced into. You then turned and stabbed his partner under the arm as she was by the gate. Next, you turned back around and stabbed Omar Khan again in his arm when he's on the stairs, before Nibeel turned back around once more. This thrust went through his arm entirely, and Khan was staggering down on the steps and worried for his partner, whom he had just seen being stabbed by you at the top of the stairs, and he tried to reach her, but that was the point where he was stabbed by you for a second time. He said you stabbed Omar Khan for a second time. The victim's partner was still on the platform at the top of the stairs with the metal gate. You then shut the gate, Rayis Nibeel trapping the victim's partner up there with you and Umer Choudhury. The victim remembers you, Umer Choudhury, calmly smoking a cigarette at the time, just chilled out, she said, and that you did most of the talking, telling Rayis Nibeel what to do. You said to Nibeel, who had already used the knife against the victim's partner, words including lay her down, put her down as well, which she believed mean finish her off. You, Rayis Nibeel, do not succeed further, however, because she managed to get the gate open and she's crying out, I've been stabbed, as she manages to jump down the stairs. As she picked herself up, she and Omar Khan both try to run, and Omar Khan just collapses, and despite the efforts of his friend, who was the driver in the car, who was nearby, and eventually of the emergency service who had been called, he died because you stabbed him. He suffered a number of sharp force injuries to his left arm and hand, which I'm sure were caused in part when he was defending himself against your attack. His injuries included a knife injury to his back, but it was a stab wound through his liver, which requiring moderate force with that knife that killed him. The knife, which you later disposed of, is large for your frame so that when the CCTV shows you and Choudhury escaping, it will be seen that you cannot walk quickly away without holding it onto it, and it impairs your gait so you almost limp. You waited some time to get rid of the knife and disposed of it at a distance from the incident, as you accepted in evidence. The judge also went on to say that they were jointly involved. He said, you two have known each other since you were about 14 years old and live about 10 minutes from each other. You describe this as a relationship of friendship, but it's clear from the cell site evidence, the messaging and the phone extracts that you two had an established relationship of drug dealing together, a close familiarity with knives, and the use in the context of drug dealing. You acted as a team. The messages between you in the days before the incident, I am sure, referred among other things to a knife belonging to Mr. Choudhury left behind by mistake. Mr. Nibeel had made a number of orders over the previous few months for a huge quantity of knives, some 65 blades, as I said, costing over £1,200, none of which had a legitimate purpose in the possession of him, and all but a handful of which he had disposed by the time of the offences. He said you had created a customer account in your mother's name to make the knife purchases, paying for all of them but a very few out of your own account, and arranging for them to be delivered to your home address. You explained you sold the weapons to make extra money. The documents show you had an account into which businesses payments disguised as other things went for your drug dealing business, and from September 2022 until the date of these offences, you have admitted you were working several days a week, earning hundreds of pounds a day. You told the court you spent the drugs, hard-earned money, on clothes, food, video games, and going out to eat. Evidence shows you both to have a deeply involved in drug dealing and dealing together, and you were in contact on many occasions and connected with the incident, showing drug-related involvement. And on the night of the incident, you left the scene together to go back to Umer Choudhury's house garden. You drop in on a series of phone lines after the incident, seeking to conceal your movements and avoid detection for the offences, show a significant level of sophistication and experience. The numerous contacts between, in particular, Umer Choudhury and the RJ line after the offences is reflected, I am sure, of the intimate involvement of you both. The with Umar Choudhury shown to take in the lead liaison role with the RJ and the organisers, and I'm sure he was telling you on occasions, Rayis Nibeel, what to do and how to do it before regarding to drugs and the scene concerning the drugs when Rayis Nibeel was using the knife on the victims. So Rayis Nibeel from Luton was jailed for life with a minimum term of 20 years, and Choudhury from Luton will serve a minimum of life, 18 years. Just want to say rest in peace to the victim and my condolences go out to your family. It's your boy GT. Keep it locked, keep it real.